pledge allegiance to the
Allegiance
flag
to the
of the
flag
United States
of the United States of America and to the republic
for which it
for which
stands,
it stands, one nation,
under God,
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with
with liberty and justice for all.
Hey, you all. John just texted me. He's in the meeting as an attendee right now. Can you let him in as a participant?
Did he join as a phone number?
Yeah, that's him. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So back in December, we at a meeting, we talked about the budget. We talked about the possibility of giving some more guidance to the Board of Selectmen as they go into their deliberation. It's something that over the years, I've been asked, what is the number so that we don't, and the most of this is because, we kind of go through, the Board of Selectmen goes through their review, Board of Finance brings people back in, same conversations. And, I don't think it's fair to the staff. So I was thinking that we come together, have a conversation again about taxes, about the number. It is not my intent to make any statements about what should be funded. I don't think that's our role. I think it's just a matter of looking at, the taxes. I think, John, you had said, the idea is you don't want any one given year to have this huge spike. So we're looking at this 5-year kind of forecasting to see what taxes look like, decisions we make this year, what does it look like next year, what does it look like the year after that, looking at the average. Jude, you have your hand up?
Yeah, after you're done, I want to say something.
Sure. So, and again, there's no vote on this. It's just a discussion. And, I really believe if the majority of the board has a specific concern, I think it's not fair to the town. I don't think it's fair to the Board of Ed. I don't think it's fair to anybody to have them go through a whole process and not know what we're thinking. I want to be very clear. Board of Ed, Board of Selectmen can present any budget they want. This is not telling them what to present. I think it's just being fair and transparent and having an open conversation about what our thoughts are on the budget.
Okay.
That's all. Go ahead, Jude.
All right. Can I just say something at this point?
Sure.
Yeah, I was looking back through my notes from December, and my recollection is that we talked amongst ourselves as a board about, general kind of principles that were guiding us. And specifically, I think we all agree that nobody wants to have serious spikes or even serious dips that are going to have to be counteracted with a spike at a later date in our budgets, that we want to try to keep things as even as possible. We've talked about what we've done in the past couple of years and looking forward if we could do similar things in the future to keep the, ultimately to keep the mill rate without experiencing a lot of changes and without the budget having serious spikes. I don't recall discussion as much about giving suggestions to the Board of Selectmen. And that's where I do have a little bit of uneasiness. I appreciate your comment, Jean, that you're not envisioning telling them in any kind of a formal way of what they can and can't do, because obviously that's not within our purview. And I'm even concerned about having any kind of a formalized discussion where we would be coming up with suggestions to the Board of Selectmen as to what we think they should be doing, either in terms of projects or dollars, because I think that would be, again, usurping the Board of Selectmen's power, which I think this board has shown before that it's kind of willing to do. And it does concern me. I think that's within the purview of the Board of Selectmen to determine what are the needs of the town, what policy of the town is going to be in terms of projects and of needs. And then to present, and the process is that they then present us with their budget, and then we deliberate on that budget. I think that I'm concerned, and maybe my concerns will be alleviated by the end of tonight's discussion. But to the extent that we are thinking of telling the Board of Selectmen what projects should be given any kind of priority, or I don't know what you mean by the number. We tell them what the number is.
So I think when we talk
Because
about,
I'm almost done, Jean,
okay,
because I do remember in December specifically stating that you don't know what a number is going to be until you see what the Board of Selectmen has told you that they have determined what the needs of the town are. And the needs of the town will drive what the budget will be. It's not like setting an arbitrary percentage or number, and that determines what the needs are. So,
But Jude, to your point though, and I agree, I don't think we should be telling the Board of Selectmen, and we certainly don't have line item control on the Board of Education, but I think the Board of Finance, and I think we've done this in the past, right, where we say, from an affordability issue and from I think Jean's point is that, the pot of funding that is available for the town and the Board of Ed to spend at any given budget season, that here's the money, go spend it as you deem appropriate within your budgets. I think.
well, Kenny, I think that's exactly wrong. I don't think that
that's fine. You can disagree, but it's up to us to determine what's affordable for the town and what the people of the town can afford to provide to the people to manage as appropriately as possible. So, it's not an open checkbook by any stretch, Jude. If the town and the Board of Ed come and say, hey, we want to go and raise mill rate 20%, we're not going to say, oh, that's okay.
Kenny, what we do, Kenny, is we look at what the needs of the town are as determined by the Board of Selectmen. And then what we do is determine if we can financially meet those needs, or what financial processes, what methods of financing would be used to try to meet those needs. We don't tell them your allowance for this year, child, is $5, spend it as you will. What we do
we could
is
do that. Sure, we could.
And that would be totally not within our purview. That is not what the charter is set up to do. But we can tell them what we think is fiscally responsible. And then, Kenny, it's up to the voters of the town to decide. They're the ones that decide what their allowance will be. They're the ones that decide, no, you want us to pay too much. No, you're not giving us enough for what we're willing to pay.
Yeah, we still need to be responsible.
No,
Jude,
we
that's
don't.
all.
What
Just
you're
need to be
doing is you're trying to turn the process on its head by hand strapping the Board of Selectmen into, this is the bucket of money you can spend. Now, and Jean could say, this is just a recommendation. Well, you know what? This has never been done before in the terms of a special meeting. And if there are conversations that take place, of course, conversations take place. But we've never formalized anything. And I'm going on record as saying that if we are, by having this special meeting, that I'm objecting to it, because it is not the process, the budget process. And it is, I think, going beyond the powers of the Board of Finance. And
Okay,
once
Jude,
again,
Jude, I got it.
serving the
I got to
powers
let
of
other
the
people
Board of
talk.
Selectmen.
Jude, again, I really want to state, this is a conversation of working collaboratively, of being transparent. This is not Big Brother coming in saying you can't. It's a conversation. I believe it's in everybody's best interest to
terms of the
have a
work.
conversation about where in which we feel that the town, and I disagree with you that it is not within our purview to say, this is in terms of the financial part. I agree with you about projects. I am not looking at projects. I am not looking at what people, nobody's presented yet. I'm looking at a number. This is a conversation that has happened when I was on the Board of Ed, and it would always happen. You'd have a joint leadership, and Joe McDougall would say, this is the max that I think we can do. I'm just taking it out into a big meeting. I don't want any secrets. I don't want anybody having private conversations. Whatever
I don't want
conversation
any secrets, and I think
goes
they're
in the front.
already private conversations, because I'm hearing about what, for example, the library is being told about what we will do and won't do. No one has talked to me, so don't talk to me about not having secret conversations. when you
Jude,
know that they're already
nobody
private.
has told the library anything. Go ahead, Fillmore.
I disagree with that. But anyway, my
let me
point
jump-
is-
Jude, let
Excuse me.
Fillmore talk, please. I'm going to call order here. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Fillmore.
Let me jump in on that, Jude. As you know, I'm the liaison for this board to the library. And a number of times, there are apparently wild thoughts going around which are incorrect. And I've tried to stamp them out to the board as recently as Monday night, I guess, to the effect that, no, we have not been doing the things that they say. And I believe that there are a bunch of emails and tweets going around about this meeting amongst some of the library patrons about how we're going to be talking about tonight about cutting the library, which is absolutely false. And I'm not sure where these are coming from, but I have assured the library board on numerous occasions that this is not happening. And I don't know where all this is coming from, but I have been running into this with the library board, and the leadership of the board understands it. But there are those out there who are chattering away. We all know how chattering away works. Thank you, Jane.
All right, Jane, I'd like to respond.
Sure.
Okay. As far as open and transparent, I'm all in favor of that. But as you yourself said, there are certain discussions that happen in other groups, like the Leadership Council, which I believe is between the superintendent of the schools and the chairs of the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance.
Yeah.
And those are regularly scheduled leadership meetings that you all have. So
Yeah.
as far as the budget goes for us, what the process has always been, and it is open and transparent, is that we have a workshop. And I think our workshop is scheduled, for 2 weeks from now? And that's the open process, the open and transparent process, where like discussions like this would be appropriate to have.
Jude, why are you worried about talking? We're not voting on anything. Why are you worried about I guess that's where I'm struggling, Jude. If
I'm
we
not
were voting on something, I could see having, being worried about it. We're not voting on anything. It's simply a discussion that in hopes that we can work collaboratively with the Board of Selectmen. But,
Yes.
I don't agree. I don't agree that we wait to see what the number is. I think if we have a collaborative discussion and we are the financial responsibilities and they're the planning responsibilities, I think it's only healthy to have a conversation. I don't know. Again, it's not a formal vote. It's a conversation.
And as I said, I hope by the end of this meeting that my concerns are totally allayed. But my concern again is that to the extent that you formalize any part of the discussion in some sort of a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen. I think that that is inappropriate, both under the charter and under the budget process. If we want to just as a board have discussions about certain items that we expect will be on the,
I don't intend to have
Budget.
any conversation about items.
and as far as a number, I'm not sure what you mean by a number. But again, it's how can we talk about a number when we don't yet know, because we haven't been presented with the Board of Selectmen's budget for the town. So when the
So
Board of
I can answer that. So the idea is the mill rate. It goes down to what is the increase in the mill rate. It doesn't matter to me as the Board of Finance what projects are in there. What matters to me is that we have consistency in the mill rate. So that's the discussion for the Board of Finance. It's not a matter of what they're bringing to the table. It's a matter of, in terms of projects, it's a matter of what is the parameters that as this board discusses, do we feel the mill rate increase should look like? And again, I disagree. I don't know why that's so bad. I don't get that.
because then I'm sorry, I'm really sorry, I'm not articulate enough or eloquent enough to be able to explain it. I'll give it one more shot. If that were how the town government of the town of Madison were to work, then I think our town charter would be written differently. Because what you're doing, I do believe it would be usurping the powers of the Board of Selectmen, because the Board of Selectmen is charged with putting together a budget for the town.
Right.
That is supposed to reflect the Board of Selectmen's policies
Yep.
regarding what the needs of the town are and how the board has prioritized those needs.
Yeah.
Then after the board creates a budget to affect those policies, to provide for the town's needs, then it sends it to us for us to determine, given those needs, given those priorities, what is reasonable. We are not charged with giving an allowance to the town and saying fit your needs within this. What we
Well,
are charged with is.
I
looking
disagree
at
with that. I think it is within the role of the Board of Finance to be the fiscal agent of the town. So it is to say that we are responsible for the increase in taxes. We are not responsible for planning projects. We're not responsible for having any kind of control over what the Board of Selectmen prioritizes. I'm not looking to do that. I'm just looking to say, as a Board of Finance, it is absolutely our responsibility to look at taxes. And that's all we're doing. We're not looking at what they're presenting. Go ahead, Fillmore.
But if you're only looking at taxes and not looking at it with the understanding of what the needs of the town are, then we're not doing our job. Our
I
job
disagree.
is
It's not an open checkbook, Jude.
It's not an open checkbook.
They can't
have
spend whatever they want
to
to.
you all when they finish.
Can I let John jump in because he has not said anything? Go ahead, John.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Gene. I'm going to apologize. I'm in the car. My son's sleeping, and my daughter's been coming in this shortly. So I want to talk. I will listen to the meeting. And Gene, you're right. I'm the one who said, I'm not the only one who said about not having big spikes. In other words, we don't want to go up we didn't go up last year, COVID, we get it, things are good. We don't want to go up 0.5% this year and 4 or 5% next year or the following year, about leveling off the spikes. I think there's a nice process in place where the Board of Selectmen goes through the budget and they bring it to us and we go through it. I think that works well. And I understand the art of this discussion. I think that's a good thing. I think it's a bad thing, though, if we were to have some sort of informal, right? There's a lot of ways of saying things, but, Gene and Kenny, we could just say, hey, here's the directive. I think we should discuss things and let the Board of Selectmen come before, present their budget in that regard, and then we go through it. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. So I just want to say I'm going to be listening. It's going to be hard for me to talk in a little bit, but I wanted to, thank you for letting me say my piece, Gene. Thanks.
Yep.
Yeah, let me jump in for a second. Jude, let me put it in a different little bit different context. I think what we're trying to do here is work collaboratively with the Board of Selectmen. If we were just to sit back and not do anything and watch TV or something until they actually present the budget, and then we decide, wow, that's way too much here. Let's cut this, that, and the other thing in order to get it down to a financial target that we might think is best. Then that might not work, because what happens if the thing that we talk happens to be the top priority of the Board of Selectmen? But since we haven't talked about it, we don't know that. So what we're trying to do here is allow the Board of Selectmen, in their wisdom, because they're the guys and gals that have to actually run the town. They're the ones who are going to saying, geez, maybe in order to stay within some sort of a reasonable financial bound, maybe we can postpone this, that, or the other for 6 months or for a year or whatnot. So we're trying to do it collaboratively rather than unilaterally at the end of the game. And I think that's where I think that's how we should be looking at it. This is a collaborative measure to bring them to be part of the discussion.
Right.
Well, you know something, Fillmore, I agree with being as collaborative as possible, and I believe that's what the workshops are for. And so I look forward to that. What I don't agree with, and I think it's going to just, I think we're going to just have to agree to disagree, is that I don't think it is fiscally responsible to give the Board of Selectmen some sort of a number saying, here's your allowance. You can build a budget within this allowance, because one of the problems that we have in the town of Madison, and one of the things that, my constituents talk to me all the time about, is the fact that Madison kicks the bucket down the road all the time. And we can either look at the state of our fleet, in which an expert has asked us to spend $1.9 million this year to make it safe and roadworthy. We can look at the state of our schools, which the buildings are in terrible shape, with the exception of Brown and Hand. Hand has its own issues. They aren't necessarily because of age. But if you look at our other schools, including Island, which we just closed a couple of years ago, we continuously kick the bucket down the road so we don't have to spend that money now. And then we find ourselves in the position that the town's in now, where there are a lot of demands on our capital, and we haven't even talked about things like the surf club yet. So if we start saying, well, we want everything to remain as is financially, just keep a horizontal line. Yeah, we don't want spikes, but we also need growth. We need to hear from the Board of Selectmen, because this is what they were elected for, to tell us what the needs are, and then look at what a number might be that we can reach. To turn it on its head is, I think, financially irresponsible. It's part of what's gotten us into the situation that we're in now. And I think it's also usurping their power. I understand that there are 4 of you on this meeting tonight, maybe 5. I don't really care at this point how many agree or not. I've said my piece and we can go forward. But
So Jude, one of the things, and I want to try to put it, I want to try to take it out of this negative realm. One of the things I want to talk about too is that there are things within the budget that we can do one-offs on, right? So
Yep.
we can take it out of there. This is
Yep.
not a negative. This is a conversation. And
Yeah,
and again, it is not unheard of to have these conversations. I just want to have it in public. And again, I'm not looking for us to decide what should be done, what shouldn't be done, but it is our role to look at the financial impact on the town. And it's 2 different ways to look at it. And I agree that, we have a different point of view on that. We have a fiscal responsibility, but you're immediately jumping to it's punitive, and it's not. We haven't even had the conversation yet. So we're not taking a vote. This is not a formal decision. This is not a directive. It's a conversation so that people in the public and the elected officials know where the Board of Finance is coming from. That's it. It's not anything else.
And as I said, and this will be the third time I've said it, so maybe it'll be heard. I hope by the end of the meeting, my concerns are allayed, but I do have concerns coming into the meeting. And I do have a very different opinion of what's fiscally responsible thing to do. And, and that's why I said, let's go for it. I'm not looking at this as punitive, but I do not think that it's our
And that's the beauty of
before we
having,
even get
right. It's the beauty of having
budget
multiple
from the
people on the
town
board to have
tell
different
town
views. That's the point
tell
of
the
it.
town what
And
they
Jude, we get
can and
emails too
can't.
I get emails from constituents saying the complete opposite, right? That,
Yeah.
they don't want taxes to increase at all. And people should be working within what they have. So, there's a point.
I totally
counterpoint.
get that.
Okay, so
you
I'm
need
gonna,
to do the best
I
we
want to
can
try to get
to
to
move
some
forward.
kind of, I'd like to try to kind of get to some kind of discussion here, if that's okay. I
Yeah.
think we know
And the
where we all come from.
transparency- The
and we can-
transparency, I think, would be best served if at a workshop where the Board of Selectmen is there as well.
And
But-
there's also going to be a workshop. This is not replacing anything. This is merely having, as we go into the budget season, it's merely having a conversation about where people are, what our concerns are financially, not in terms of projects, not in terms of, capital needs, but a way to say, look, there are certain things we could pull out so we can reduce the ask. And those conversations have been having for months. So this is just a way for us to kind of come together and publicly have a conversation about some of our thoughts and concerns. That's it. There's no formal anything. This is just a conversation. Okay. Stacy, do you want to, again, we keep going back to that 5-year plan, the idea of the mill rate. Do you want to pull that up?
Yep.
So one of the concerns is, obviously we used the undesignated fund balance to offset the mill rate last year. So it was 0 because of COVID. So the problem becomes then this year, we're in the hole to begin with. So I think from my personal opinion, I do think we've got to go back into the undesignated fund balance, especially because we're not out of it yet with COVID. So I want the Board of Selectmen, I want the public to know that it is the Board of Finance, I believe, in my opinion, intention to say we can't come off that 673 in 1 year. And that I think my recommendation to this board is going to be we should still use that to offset the mill rate. I don't know if anyone wants to comment on that. Thoughts?
I agree.
I agree.
Okay.
I think you have a healthy fund balance, so I agree also. Sorry, Filmer, before you.
Go ahead, John.
No, that was it. I just said, I
Okay,
thought Filmer
yeah.
was going to yell at me. Other than-
No, we do. And that's, a reason to say, let's just upfront say to the Board of Finance, we have every intention of using that as long as no one objects, but it's something for them to consider that there will be that room based on what we're doing with the undesignated fund balance. Go ahead, Stace.
Okay, so other than the undesignated fund balance, there's a couple of other assumptions that are included. You could see right here in 2021, this is where we ended up last year. We had a 0% increase in the mill rate from the year before. So this is where we're starting. And then these two columns would be the projection for 21-22. So the other assumptions, other than the 673 for fund balance,
Excuse
we
me,
have,
Excuse me,
Yeah.
Stacy, can you actually point out when you say these would be because I'm kind of limited on my screen here. So maybe you could point out the specific numbers that you're talking about.
Yeah,
Sorry.
if you,
Yep, I'm
if
trying
you
to.
bottom
I
line,
tried
I'm
to
in the
highlight
car,
it.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, and John's
Yep.
in a car, so maybe you could like slow down a little bit.
Right,
Point
yeah,
out, say
just give me the
numbers up.
number,
I didn't
Okay.
even start yet. I was just saying that the 673 that Jean mentioned is the first assumption in the 21-22 budget mill rate calculation. The next assumption is the revenue for OLM, and I could go down and show you that. That's
Yes.
included in here. That is the net revenue, so that includes the lease income that we'll be getting, less the buses and the nurse expenses for the private school. So that's also included in the mill rate assumptions.
Is that the 413, 125?
No, it says right here underneath it, it says OLM
John,
included.
What-
see that?
2.49, John.
say it again?
It's included in revenue.
But what is the number for OLM?
I believe it is, what's the total lease? 400 minus the buses.
All right, I understand. All right.
Okay, it's minus the buses and the nursing or the health services. It's a net number
Right.
from whatever the lease total is. Okay, the other, I'm sorry?
No, go ahead.
Keep going.
Okay. The other assumption, you can see this 205, and I'm highlighting it, is the interest that we're assuming for 21-22. We were locked in when we went out to RFP for our banking services. We were locked in with People's Bank for 3 years at 1.8%. With that expires October 1st of 21. When I reached out to the bank, they suggested that I use a 0.2% interest rate. So our interest will be reduced significantly for fiscal year 21-22.
So that's one of the things that in having this conversation, I wanted to highlight that is a concern. It's not something that we plan on, which is why I wanted to pull these numbers together to look at some of the things that have changed that are causing us probably a little bit of an issue as we get through the whole budget cycle.
And that's 205,000 to the plus, right?
You could see, Ken, last year it was 585.
Yeah,
It is going down to 205.
so it's
But
three.
this is revenue that
380.
we are expecting to include in our calculation for the
Yeah,
mill
no,
rate.
I'm just trying to articulate the benefit for John because he can't see the numbers. I'm just trying to call it out, Stace.
Thanks, Ken. Right, yeah, I got you though. I know the interest rate dropped off the table. Good thing you locked it in for 3 years, but thanks, Ken.
Okay, the other assumption, and it looks like this is pretty accurate, our grand list is actually growing 73 basis points. This is way higher than the average. We had calculated a few years ago, the 10-year average, it was 65 basis points. Last year, it was 66. But this year, the actual is 73 basis points. So that is what is included in the mill rate calculation for 21-22. The only other thing that I do want to highlight is in the CIP, we included a potential referendum, bonding referendum for the community center as well as the schools. If that did go through, as we presented in the CIP document, there would have been debt service in this box here. However, we held off and I excluded that, assuming that that would be pushed off a year. So I just want to highlight that there's a little bit of an inconsistency between this document and the CIP document. So those were
Gee, can I ask
the
a quick question?
assumptions.
Yeah, hold on 1 second, Stace. John, go ahead.
Thanks. Stace, again, it's not funny. What's the difference in the growth of the grand list with the, say, just using the same mill rate in terms of revenue? Do you have that there or no, the additional revenue?
I don't, John. All I have is the growth, and then I threw in all the expenditures in these other assumptions. I can get that as we work through it. I can move it back as if it didn't grow, and then we could figure out that difference if you'd like.
Well,
Yeah, I just
isn't it
figured-
0.66? It was 2.9.
Wait, Ken, hold on 1 second. Let John finish, okay? Go ahead, John.
Yeah,
I was
thanks.
trying to get to
I
his
just-
answer.
All right, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. I just trying to figure the growth of the ground list, which is a good news, right? And we're talking about that, the increase, what the increase in revenue was, even if we just for discussion use the same mill rate as last year. That's all.
Which was 0.
Yeah, I could remove the growth if you'd want, and then we could,
Well,
You know,
let's,
see
John,
what-
if you're okay, let's go down and,
Yeah, it's good.
yeah. Because
okay,
we can
I'll
move
do
things.
that at the end.
Hold
John,
on 1
if that's
second, hold
okay.
on. So we can do this live, John, so we can move numbers in and out to see what it does to the mill rate. So let's go through it once and then go back and do that. Is that okay?
That's fine, sure.
Okay, go ahead, Steve.
Okay. So those were pretty much the assumptions that are built into here, other than the expenditures. So now I'm going to talk about the expenditures. When you received your budget document, the town was showing a 23 million total budget, 23.6, without additional budget requests. And the Board of Ed was showing a total budget of 59.372. So the Board of Ed is as it was presented. The town just rolling over contractual and salary increases was showing a $23.6 million total budget for operating budget, not including capital. So then what I did is I added every single additional budget request. So if you're looking at the screen, those total additional budget requests comes to about 945,000. That includes the library, the ambulance, the additional positions, everything that's in that section of your binder comes to 944. That also includes the CIP additional request of 160,000. So I'm adding that. So we're starting at the most that the budget would be requested at. The next line item is a reduction of 29,000, and what that is a savings in our workers' comp net of our liability insurance. So from your document, your actual binder that you have, or the PDF that we sent you, that will be going down 29,000 for savings that came back from KERMA after we developed the document. What I then did is took out 296,000 for potential one-time special appropriations. This has been discussed through both boards at the budget workshop. What if we didn't build up the budget base for these one-time requests and did a special appropriation? So what I did is I took that out of here, assuming that we'll move in the other direction and ask for a special appropriation. And those three items are the reval. In your budget book, there's a request to increase the reval reserve by $30,000. So I took that out, saying we could do a special appropriation for that. Then I took out the 106,000 for severance payments. So we normally put $50,000 into the severance reserve. In your requested budget, it was increased by 106, and those are for retirees, for the beach and rec director, the assistant fire marshal, and then the maintenance or the facilities director. So I took those out, saying this could be a one-time payment through special appropriation. And then the third item is the CIP. So I know in your document for CIP, the capital increased by 106,000 or 160,000, sorry. And Jude, this is before, Jude, Justin, this is before we increased it for the highway. That's a whole other discussion. But we did ask in the original submission that CIP be increased by 160,000. I left CIP flat and said we can infuse those funds for one time through a special appropriation, so we didn't have to build that into the budget base. And as Dean said, I could change any of this. I just wanted us to have a starting point for tonight. So again, what I did is I added every single additional budget request, took out the 29,000 for a known savings, and took out potential one-time special appropriations for the revow, the severance, and CIP.
So one of the
What's
reasons
that?
why I wanted to have this discussion is because I want people to understand there are a lot of moving parts here. Some of them good, some of them bad. The interest rate's not good, but then there's a lot of savings. And then the idea that we do have this healthy fund balance and there's ways in which we can offset the requests. And I think it's important we have these conversations publicly. Go ahead, Stace.
Okay, so that pretty much brings us down with all the other assumptions that I talked about in regards to revenue and the fund balance. That brings a potential 21-22 mill rate increase to a 28.93, which is a 2.05% increase. So I thought this is where we could start to see, to start your discussions at this point.
So John, what do you want to look at? You wanted to pull out the, are you there still?
Is he unmuted?
He's muted. All
He's muted.
right, well, Fillmore, do you have something? And then we can come back to John.
Okay, just unmuted. So I think that's an excellent way to start looking at it, Stacy. Thank you for doing this. And I think that going back to what I said earlier, I think that maybe there are some reductions and eliminations that could be made to get that down below the 2 mark. I suspect that there are, several $100,000 that don't have to be included in next year's budget, either on the town side or the Board of Ed side. And I think we should have that discussion as to how much we think that could be reduced, or we could just say, okay, whack it several $100,000 and see what happens. It would be nice if we thought about how much we could actually be comfortable in putting forward to the town. I think, Jude, you have made a very good point that ultimately it's the townsfolk who will decide, but we don't want to make it so big that it's an automatic no. We want to make it so that it appears to be a reasonable amount to the majority of the folks who will show up and vote. Thank you, Jean.
So, yeah. So the average mill rate over the last 5 years, Stace, is the 1.94, correct?
Correct. Yeah, that's why I scrolled down things, Jean. Yeah, that is the average over the last 5 years. If we left it at this 2.05, this is what the increase in an average taxpayer assessed value of 400,000 assessed, not appraised, would be $232 per household.
Okay.
Yep.
Does that include last year where it was 0?
Yes. It's a
So-
5-year average.
So if you took out that 0, because I think last year was a totally unusual and emergency kind of a situation, what would the average be for the 5 years prior to last year?
I don't have that right now, Jude. I'm sorry.
I think that,
I can give you the 4 years without the 0 if you'd like.
all right.
Oh,
And just to state the obvious, we're not out of the woods yet. There are still a lot of people hurting from COVID. This is another, in my view, another emergency year. We should do everything we can to try to minimize any impact to the people of the town as much as we can. Because again, we're not out of the woods. There are people that are still hurting out there, people that don't have jobs, people that are struggling to meet their needs. So we should still keep our eye on that ball.
Obviously, Kenny, I think that is critical that we do that. I think that we're very fortunate that Madison hasn't been hit as hard as many other towns. But I also think that part of our looking at what's fiscally responsible is that maintaining a zero last year has what you end up doing is not doing some things that were in the budget and cutting those so you could maintain that zero last year. If you are striving for something low again this year, what you're doing is just putting that financial burden on future years, which are already, if you look at the 4 years before that, 2.4%, plus you're adding, maybe what you didn't do last year, plus you're adding what you're thinking of cutting this year. And I don't think that's that's something I think we have to keep our
Right.
eye on as well.
But keep in mind, Jude, that we added the 673, so we didn't have to cut the budget drastically.
Right. That's the whole point of having
Right.
that. And using
So we
that fund-
did not, the zero increase is
Designated fund
actually
balance.
artificial because we put the money in. So
Well,
I-
there are some
we
things
didn't do
that
nothing, right?
there are some things that did get cut last year and that we didn't end up doing, but we don't have to get into nitty gritties right now. We're just talking about the principles here.
Right.
And I agree with the principles, but what I'm really impressed at is that even though we haven't been presented with the formal town budget yet, that looking at 2.05% overall seems very reasonable, and it's certainly below the average of the last 4 years before COVID.
Yeah, so my concern with it, it's not so much the number, it's the jump. It's from 0 to 2.05 in 1 year. That's my concern. I think that's a high jump.
And if I could just, say something.
Yep, go ahead, Justin.
I just want, Jude, one thing that weighs on my mind, I agree with everything you're saying, but looking back 5 years, 5 years ago, Academy was on the radar, but it's obviously with every passing year, it's getting closer and closer to something happening there. So right now, I know we all know this, but from my perspective, we're kind of focusing on operating expenses right now in terms of this budget process, but we can't lose sight of the fact that somewhere in the very near future, there's going to be a very large decision regarding Academy and the schools. So to anything we can do with regard to what I'd call kind of the baseline budget will put us in better position to absorb those projects, which we know are getting closer to becoming a decision every day. So we're not nitpicking over little things. Those are quite large things, just to keep in mind,
I think Justin brings up a good point. I do believe the schools need a tremendous amount. And if we are going to position taxpayers and voters to understand that there's options here that we can help so that when that debt comes on, they are not going to see a spike in taxes. And if that helps people to make a good decision, then I want this conversation to be public. But it's all about planning, and that goes back to the 5 years. And I agree with Justin. We've got these big projects. We can't ignore Academy forever. We can't ignore the schools forever. So we have to, I believe it's our responsibility to create a budget that allows for the long-term needs of the town and for, the least of our, not least, it's a bad word, but the most vulnerable part of our population, our children, we need to make a plan. We need to make sacrifices, and we need to create a budget that allows for those needs to be met. And that's when I look at the 5 year is my biggest goal.
And I know I've said this for the last 3 years, but just having one lever to pull on for revenue, which is, our residential tax base, makes it very difficult to be able to do a lot of the things we wanted to do or we want to do moving forward. It would be so much easier if we had a bigger commercial tax base to lean on.
Any other thoughts, comments?
I wanted to ask Stacy, I apologize for not asking at an earlier meeting, but regarding the grand list, increase, which sounds like it was a surprise. If I'm looking at it right, it's like 22 million or almost 22 million in increase over last year. What drives that? Because obviously we haven't done a reval. So is that just, do you know what contributed to that? Is that like new construction or home improvements, or is it some properties actually being revalued?
I thought it was appreciation in home value, Stace. Is that right? Like people coming in, spending more money and then higher taxes on a higher, or no?
Yeah, but not through a reval, Kenny, right? Just by actually,
No,
I mean, there's been
not
tons of improvements going on all over town.
Yeah,
So maybe,
that's true.
but that's what I just wanted to confirm. Do we know what makes up that number, Stacy? Is that what it is?
I do, Justin, and I could forward it to you all afterwards. I have the breakdown. I do think the motor vehicle makes up a big piece of that as well. But it is the values that have gone up in through a lot of building projects, and you could see our building permits skyrocketed. And this again is as of October 1st. So that's when, things were pretty busy in town. I will send that. I have it broken out by type.
So what I want to do, go ahead. Sorry, Justin, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna, so grand list, I should know this, that's one reason, but is this appraised value or assessed value? The grand list.
The grand list is assessed value. Sorry, Justin.
Assessed value. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And actually, I'm gonna.
Yeah.
Sorry,
so if I did the math right,
I have the detail here.
It's based on 70% of the fair market, right?
Yes.
Right.
So John, I think if I did the math right, just on my calculator, to your earlier question, if the mill rate stayed the same, it would be about 600,000 increase in tax revenue just from that grand list increase.
Thanks, Justin. Yeah, like I said, I'm in the car. I appreciate it. I did have a couple of thoughts, Gene, if that's all right. But
Yeah, go ahead.
winding down, that's okay too.
Yeah.
Sorry,
No, go ahead.
for every once in a while this mutes. Yeah, it's just and Stacy, thanks for putting that together. And Justin, you brought up a good point about the increase in the grand list and the revenue. I mean, to me, the 2%. I know what you're saying, Kenny, from 0 to 2, or Gene from 0 to 2 is high. Where we did go 0 last year. It's not that bad of a budget. I hope people understand what I'm saying. And that were my concern. If we go too low, all of a sudden you're going to go from 0 to whatever, and then next year you're going to start to add some projects, and you're going to go even much higher. So that's where I am on that. So the 2% I think is for a fair reason. I like to see to go through everything and go through the process, but all in all, I think it could have been a lot more difficult. That's all.
Yeah, and I agree. Mike, when I look at this, I'm looking at the 5-year, and I want to see, as you described, John, I think we're on the same page. I know I think 0 to 2 is a little high, but when you start to look out at using the same kind of projections, and even, Stacy, I believe you do have debt in the future.
I do. Yep.
The debt's in there, John. So now you start to look at the 5-year, which is what I like about this. And there is not those big jumps because we're a little more measured in each year. So for the same reasons, that's why I like working with this chart, because it does give us with the debt, and the debt is based on our consultants, pulling down on bands in different years. And I think it gives us a good handle on that, exactly the point you're trying to make, that 5-year. So there is consistency.
And John, I agree with you. I think, that the 2% is not a terrible number. My only thought is if we can get another 50 or 60 bips out of it, it's just going to have it be a little more palatable. And then again, that increase isn't such a stark jump from last year to this year. And then maybe it's a launch pad into what's happening the following year. So I don't think anybody's trying to get to the 0 number that obviously it'd be great to, but I just don't think that's realistic, right? So how do you try to take a measured step from the 0 to a normal run rate?
Right.
Hopefully where we'll be over the next couple of years,
Let me jump in and comment, John. I think your point is very well taken. We don't want to just kick the can down the road, as they say. but the one of the biggest increases, in fact, the biggest increase in that 900 and something extra is from the ambulance, and that's a one-time jump. And that's to get them up to where they need to be, and so it's not going to be in the following years. There's not going to be another 300 on top of that. So I think the big jump is it will already have been taken this year. And the second biggest is the library, and they're absorbing that large increase in the pension. The same thing that the town saw in the current year. You know, the fact that all us guys are living longer.
Yep.
The
Thanks, Fillmore.
yeah, hooray! So I think
Not eating those healthy salads, Fillmore.
yeah, just trying to help out here. So I think that that we could do a little whacking on that 2.05 and still without penalizing the future years. And I think we could, I hate to start saying numbers here, but I think we could very easily knock off maybe 350 or 4 from that number without any real problem. So, and it would bring us, wow, look at the, No.
So are you contemplating, because these are basically one-offs, both with the ambulance and with the library, having to do its recalculations due to the changes in pension, are you considering using the undesignated fund balance?
No, these increases will continue. But there will
There
not
won't be a jump.
It won't be a jump.
They're one-time adjustments, but
It's
to a new
one-time
level.
adjustment.
Right.
It's a one-time adjustment to get
To a new base.
to the new reality. So there'll be presumably in these, it'll go up inflation wise, you know, a nickel or a dime next year, but it's not going to be the 300 grand jump over on top of this year.
Right. So one of the things I think I wanted to have these discussions, because one of the things that we have done in the last 3 years and we'll probably do this year is when we adjust these certain numbers, as you see, it affects the bottom line and the mill rate. So it's a way for us, as we are working on the budget, is to look at ways in which we can adjust the mill rate in real time and look at the decisions that we're making. And then within the 5 years, look at what that decision has on the following year and that decision has on the next year. So that's why this, I think, is so important, and why I wanted to show the public and you know, for us also, this is how we look at, it's not, you know, it's not just a matter of isolated line items. It's about looking at what the total number is and how that affects the bottom line and the mill rate.
And the out years.
And the out years, right. That's important to me. And go back to the same thing. We have things we need to do in this town. And if we, in 1 year, when we haven't even put the debt on, if we are not careful, then when the debt comes on, the taxes will be really high. And I think it will hurt our chances to get certain things done that we want to do when it comes to a vote. If we're responsible and we say, we know these projects are out there, we know we can keep consistency, we know that this is a year, we're still in the middle of a pandemic. So there's ways in which we can look and be responsible to help us to get those things done that we really want to do.
John, let me, this is Fillmore. Let me ask you something, my friend. Because I don't think you can see the numbers that Stacy plugged in. She was thinking ahead of me. She plugged in. She grabbed a 350 reduction there, but just one of the numbers that I threw out there, and that gets the mill rate increase down to 1.62%, and gets the average house up 100. I just want to make sure that you saw that, John.
No, I'm not. Thank you, Phil. I did not see it. I'm in the car.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's why
I'm on the
that's what
phone.
I'm telling you.
And I'm trying to see where, could you repeat what you said, Fillmore? I'm sorry. 'cause I
Yeah.
missed you.
While I was rambling on there, Stacy plugged in that 350, 350 negative that she plugged in, because I was saying, I was grabbing numbers. Saying, okay, we take out,
Yes,
that I think we could very easily take out 3 or maybe 354.
Jude, he was just showing how the reduction impacts the mill rate to the 160.
So if,
That 350 took it to the 162. That's all he was showing.
yeah, so that 350 number that Stacy plugged in lowered the mill rate increase from, I believe it was 205 down to 162%.
For illustration purposes.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So let me ask, Jean, let me ask you a question. And I appreciate your explaining that before when we were talking about like the library pension and the ambulance, that what you're looking to do is to avoid the spike this year. But given that those numbers are what they are and they're going to have to be, paid, that is, those increases are going to be in their budgets going forward. So it's they're not one-offs.
It just helps the
Yeah.
base.
So to help, if we were to consider going ahead and funding without taking out this 350, could we not use the undesignated fund balance to offset at least half of that this year? So that the brunt of those increases are spread over 2 years instead of absorbing it all in this year.
I'm sorry, Jude, I'm confused. Can you say it again?
So let's say between, and this is just a for example, between the ambulance and the library pension, I don't know what the number is, but let's say it's 1.5 million. I understand not wanting to include all of that in the budget this year that would directly impact the mill rate, because that would be a spike that you would prefer not to have.
So can I just can I say one thing and then let you keep going?
Yeah.
I want to be careful not to talk about specifics, because I think that's the Board of Selectmen's role. I think our role is just to say the second part of what you're saying. We're trying not to have these spikes, but it's up to the Board of Selectmen to decide what they would push out, what they would move around based on what you're saying. That would be their decision. For us, it's strictly a numbers game where.
Well, yeah, I don't want to get back into our whole like discussion where, I mean, I understand your position and you understand mine on that. But my question here is more narrow and doesn't get into a philosophical difference. What I'm talking about here is, instead of absorbing all of those increases from ambulance, and these are just examples, okay? So I'm not saying specifically those, but instead of absorbing all of those differences this year, which you're concerned would create a spike up to the 2.05%, can we not use some of the undesignated fund balance to fund some of those increases this year? And then so that the impact on the budget and the mill rate would be felt not just in 1 year, but it would be spread over 2 years.
Gene, do you mean more than the 627?
Yes.
Oh.
So the problem with using more than 627, this is always, and it's a philosophical discussion. My concern in using the undesignated fund balance to offset the mill rate, so not projects and not infusing funds, but actually using it to offset the mill rate, it artificially inflates the base. So now the following year, we have to find, let's say we go to $1 million, right? Now we have to find $1 million in the following year. So right now, our undesignated fund balance is healthy, but we would have to continue to overtax people in order to keep that level of funds in that account in order to continue to offset the mill rate. So it's kind of a vicious cycle. So during a pandemic, I believe that is an appropriate use of funds. And we know, and it will take years to wean off of that number, but I am not comfortable continuing to do that because I believe in the long term, it puts future boards in a position where they would have to have more money. And the only way, as Ken said, we don't have any other funding mechanism. It would have to be through taxes. So you're kind of setting up future boards to have to increase taxes. Doing it as a one-off, I'm all for, because then the current taxpayer who put that money in and paid can reap the benefits of it. And the way we can do that, but not hurt future taxpayers, is to do the one-offs. So that's where, and it's a philosophical discussion. Some people believe you can keep using it and that it's always going to be there. I say eventually it's not going to be there. Unless boards make decisions that, tax people. So that's my concern. I'm not saying no. I'm not saying we don't go a little higher, but that's my concern.
Yeah, and I hear you, Jean, and I actually agree with you on what the.
Don't sound so shocked, Jude.
No, but I don't agree with you totally.
Okay, there you go. Now I feel better.
Okay, now the world is right again.
Now the world's right again. Go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with you on what's proper and not proper uses of the undesignated fund balance in typical scenarios. I do think that COVID has put us in an unusual place, and I think that was reflected in our approach to the budget last year. And I think that we ought to, I think you have to have it one way or another. We either should continue using it this year, realizing we're, again, still in a COVID world, but I don't think you can have it both ways. I don't think you can have, you can argue that COVID isn't over yet, so we really have to keep our interest rates down even below an average of what they've been over the pre-COVID years. And on the other hand, say, well, but we really can't use the undesignated fund balance because it's not appropriate. It was last year. So
well, we are using it, Jude.
But you're still.
Stace, can you?
You're still
Jude, we are using it because I agree with you. We can't go cold turkey on it.
So, but given that we have a reasonable budget this year that's below our pre-COVID averages, why can't we, given the COVID situation, use more of it than what you're proposing?
So for two reasons. One, because I believe, again, the following year, we're going to be in the hole even more. And I believe coming out of the pandemic, and I know you made a comment about how Madison is faring. I have a different view of how people are faring, and I struggle with doing anything that, even as people start to get their feet back underneath them and people start to go back to work and perhaps find different jobs, different professions, I do not want to be the cause of somebody having to be overtaxed when they're just starting to get back to normal. So I would rather say, in the heat of this moment, it is not a good time to back off using the undesignated fund balance, but it's also not a good time to increase it, because as you look at this 5-year, we can very reasonably start to back off of it. So 673 again this year because we're still in the pandemic. But when people start to get going again, and I believe we will come out of this, and I believe people will be okay. But in the moment when I don't want to start saying, so next year, it's another $1 million we take out of it, but we have to replace the $1 million. I just think you can get yourself into a position that when we start to see the light at the end of the tunnel, we've created more darkness. And that's what I'm afraid of.
And,
So
I am as well. And I am as well. And that's why I'm concerned that if we're taking what I think is a very reasonable 2.05 budget, if we're considering taking another, I don't know what Fillmore suggested, another hunk out of it, another 350, what we're really doing is taking that 350 and the amounts that we cut last year, and we're pushing those down the road. So those will have to be included at some point, and it will further
or not.
contribute to a tax increase.
Yeah, but again,
Jude,
we
everybody's
are
doing
infusing
that
it
these days.
above the 673. We're infusing funds in to get projects done from the undesignated fund balance, but it doesn't affect the base. So that's the difference. So
Well,
we
and I guess
will.
what I'm saying is to have an increase this year, but to have a reasonable increase that won't result in such a punitive increase in future years. I would prefer to see that than see a spike in a couple of years to make up for the things that we're cutting out now.
Right, but if you look at this, Jude, we're in this 5-year plan. We are building everything back up, and that's to avoid exactly what you're saying. So as we start to look out, we look at what we put into capital. Projects are being done. If the project is being done out of the CIP, it drops out of the CIP. If it drops out, or CNRE or CIP, whichever, once that drops out, then you don't need those funds anymore because the project no longer exists. So if you look at this, it takes into account exactly what you're saying to avoid. Stacy even is included presumptions on the debt. So that is also built into this. And that's why when I look at the mill rate at the end, all I see is that all I want to see is there's consistency and the assumptions remain what we know, and even some we don't know, but we're going to presume on certain things. And that's where I would like to stay focused. So I think we're on the same page in what you're saying, that neither one of us want to see in the third year this huge spike. But in order to do that, we have to be more measured as we go through. But what the Board of Selectmen decides to put in what year is their decision. It's just a matter for me as the chair of the Board of Finance. I just want to make sure that I am not in the short term doing something that's going to hurt the schools, that's going to hurt the ambulance, that's going to hurt the senior center, that's going to hurt something in the future that's going to be in need. So,
I don't know if I can.
go ahead.
Thanks. So just a couple of points.
Can't hear
John,
you,
you're
John.
cutting out a little bit.
Yeah, I know. I'm in the car. Forget it. I'll call later.
Try again. Try one more time. Go ahead.
Try one more time,
Again.
John. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, you're not going to hurt my feelings, believe me. Yeah, at some point, you're going to have to replenish the fund balance. Also, we don't know, because we did get a lot of, COVID's horrible. We did get some state aid this year. If we're going to need our undesignated fund balance, like we thought, but we budgeted for it, so we don't know that. So those are the points I just wanted to bring up. I mean, I don't know, Stacey, you won't know until next year, until it's audited, obviously, officially. But, you know, I just think let the Board of BOS give us a proposed budget. I mean, you know, and then we do our job. That's all.
I think that's right, John. I couldn't agree with them more.
So one of the things I think that I'm hoping is coming out of this is people understand the fact that we as a board don't just look at 1 year. And I think and the ways that we can think outside the box, and the way in which the Board of Finance pulls together through Stacy's office, all of these different variables that affects the bottom line. So regardless of what the projects are, regardless of what is going to come before us, we have a framework to understand that we can think out of the box, that we can be creative, but yet we can be responsible, and we can look long-term at the decisions we make today and not burden future taxpayers or future boards with, with bad decisions. And that's where I just want to make sure we understand that this is the process we go through, that we're going to continue to go through it. And when you put a different number in, how it drastically can change the mill rate. And again, my concern is what is the mill rate year after year, not necessarily what it is in this 1 year.
Right, and Jean, I also, to your point of just communication and sharing with the Board of Education and the Board of Selectmen, that we're still, working through challenges. There's people in the town working through challenges. We're not out of the woods yet. Obviously, we need to make sure we take care of the town so they can provide the services that meet the needs of the people of the town. But we're not at a point where we can, have budget reflecting nice to haves. It's still a needs, in my view, of what is important and what's required versus, anything on top of that. And I think that's how we get, to a place where we can be as fiscally responsible and conservative with the budget. And then at the same time, making sure we're leveling off on what the numbers look like so that we prevent any spikes to the mill rate over our 5-year plan, but also being responsible and thoughtful for a lot of, I think, of what people are feeling and seeing as a result of the pandemic.
Any other closing thoughts from people?
Well, I guess I just repeat that I don't think that a 2.05% increase is, I wouldn't consider that a real spike given what we've done in the past 2 years and even more so in the past 5 years. And I would just be concerned if we were to look at that number and cut from it to the point where we're going to have to make up numbers in future years. But we won't know a lot of this until we get the budget from the Board of Selectmen and see what their presentation is and have the workshop.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I agree. I'll just reiterate what kind of weighs on my mind is not only looking at the budget and the future year's budgets, but really just knowing that we have some very large projects out there, and the best we can do to kind of prepare ourselves to be able to take on those projects if the town wants them, I think is important. And I think, as Kenny said earlier, and I agree, why we love Madison is why it can't really, it's not a commercial district. It's basically a largely residential town with small commercial pockets. And so this is kind of what we're dealing with. We're not going to land an Amazon headquarters or warehouse anytime soon, and we don't want one. So we just gotta, for the long term, we gotta realize what supports this town and do the best we can within it.
Good. Thank you. Fillmore?
Yeah.
Oh, I think that's right. I agree with Justin, and I agree with some of the other statements that have been made that we do need to be careful with the fund balance. We shouldn't be using it to offset to an extended amount the normal budgets. I think the 670 is a good number, but if we jacked it up to $1 billion or so, I think we're maybe getting into a little bit of tough territory, because we do have a number of possible projects coming up that are going to be really needing that, including let's face it, parking making a grab in our pocket. And also if any of these future bond issues should come through, if people approve some of these bond issues, our debt service is going to be going up to a significant amount, and we might wish to smooth that out with putting some money into the debt service reserve. So I think we need to be a little bit careful there how we use fund balance.
John?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yeah,
All right.
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead, bud.
Again, all right, thanks, buddy. One, I appreciate it. It's been difficult. I could hear every word you guys were saying. It's just sometimes harder on this end. And, you know, and Phil, I heard you. And I think Justin and Gene and all of us are concerned about, you know, the spikes or the budget, not just this year going forward. You have a good group of people who really care, and I think that's important to understand. And again, I'm not, you know, as worried about the 2% as, you know, I think it could have been a little bit more difficult. So, you know, that's all I wanted to say.
So John, who won the hockey game or whatever it was?
She's softball practice first, and now I'm taking her to hockey practice. So, but thank you
okay.
for asking.
Okay.
So, but don't
Okay.
play on the
Hockey
weekends.
practice at
So, I'd love
8:30
to
at
see you
night.
go, but yeah,
Okay.
she's getting a little older again. She's on a travel team, so they practice from 8:40 to 10 o'clock.
Oh, my
right.
gosh.
all right.
But thank you for understanding.
Does everyone, Jude, you want to go again?
no, I
Okay.
think it's time to get to the public to see if any of them
Yep.
have any questions.
Yep. So public comment, who's got the, Danielle, is she controlling that?
I don't, if you have a public comment, if you could just raise your hand. Okay, Joan Walker has a comment, so I'm gonna allow her to talk.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. So having gone through this process a few times in my lifetime, I just want to thank everybody for their comments. But I think that one of the things that we have to look at is what the needs that the town and the employees and the department heads have said are their needs in order to make this town work and to not be, you know, overstressing the people that work for the town. So I really want to implore everybody to allow the Board of Selectmen to do their job and to present the budget, allow the Board of Ed to do their job and present their budget, and not going into your deliberations with a set number in your brain, and allow them to justify what they want to do, and then allow the public to also be a part of that conversation, and not basically feel as though you guys have to speak for the public, because I think the public can speak for itself, and we've seen that in the past. And I think, quite honestly, a 2.05 budget is a very reasonable budget in this time. Thank you.
Anyone else?
I don't see anything.
Okay, going once, twice, 3 times. All right, I need a motion to adjourn.
You got it.
Thank you.
So
Second,
moved.